August 8th, 2026, The Standard. Fresh row over religious attire in schools looms after MOU signing. This was a very interesting, like, news, like, header. And I was like, I really want to, what is happening, right? Like, what's happening? And, hold on. Yeah. So let me just read this because I want to hear your 2 cents on this. A parent has moved to court to stop the implementation of agreement by Inter-Religious Council of Kenya, ICK. The agreement on wearing hijabs in religious-sponsored schools was signed in Marsabit. Those are summaries, right? So let me just read this. A new row over the wearing of religious attire in schools could be in the offing following the signing of an agreement by members of the ICK. The agreement on wearing hijabs in religious sponsored schools was signed in Marsabit, the document which allegedly gives a green light to school heads to determine whether a girl ought to wear a hijab to school or not, is now at the heart of a case filed by a parent, Boru Guyo. So basically, allegedly, again, I haven't read the document myself, right? It would give the management of the school decision-making power regarding whether girls have to wear a hijab in a religious-sponsored school. Guyo, through his lawyers, Abdul Rasul Mohammed, Rajan Shaban, and Omar Salim, has sued ICK, Marsabit Interfaith Council, Teachers Service Commission, the Marsabit County Director of Education, Attorney General, and the Marsabit County government. He argues that hijab is not just a cloth or headscarf, but a manifestation of the girl's faith, personal dignity, identity, and obedience to the Creator. In his case before High Court Judge Francis Olel, Guyo further argued that it is illegal and unfair for a Muslim girl to be denied education or services based on her decision to show her faith. Basically, they want to avoid the risk of it being a religious-sponsored school, and they're saying that she shouldn't wear a hijab, and maybe that's the girl's expression of her faith, or the family's expectations for, like, this is culturally how we express our faith. She would be at risk of being denied access to school, which goes against her right to access education. And I agree. So yeah, in his case, denying a woman access to essential public services, including education, is an affront to her dignity, equality, and constitutionally protected freedom of religion, argued Guyo. Meaning, whether she wears a hijab, it should not affect her schooling. Now, such exclusion compels her to choose between her faith and her fundamental rights, thereby striking at the very core of her identity, conscience, and human dignity. He's added. This makes me wonder, was the case that she was denied access because the school said she shouldn't wear a hijab? Is what makes me think with this case, right? He noted that the agreement was signed by Christian faith communities and Muslim faith communities, witnessed by the county commissioner, county director of education, county education board, and county TSC, and facilitated by the ICK. So meaning the Christian and the Muslims looked at this and were like, we like this idea of management deciding what a girl should wear at the school, religious-sponsored schools especially. Okay, now Guyo further stated that the agreement also gave the school's board of management the unfettered powers to regulate the specific size, style, and coverage of the hijab. There's a lot of power here going to management. I don't like this, and you'll see why. Nevertheless, Guyo argued that the parties never consulted the parents of the minors who would be affected or carried out public participation, meaning they just wrote this and just passed it. And this is going to bring conflict from the bottom up. Instead of it being case by case, they kind of just blanketed it out with disagreements. And now schools have power to just run with it. And okay, it'd be one thing if this alleged document said that they can implement it according to what is appropriate at their locality. I would assume that would be written, right? But then also, that gives a lot of responsibility to the school to be like, hey, parents, this just came through. What are your stances on this? And this is where we're coming from at the moment, But I'm not hearing any of that dialogue, right? And that means you're giving responsibility to the shareholders of education, which would be the parents, families, and the schools. But like, it's not like I'm staying up to date with all the laws that are coming out, right? And the schools communicate. We're deciding to do this. Work with me before we implement it. Like, so the schools have a lot of responsibility here. Um, the Kenyan Constitution cannot be subservient to an MOU as depicted herein by the respondents. The MOU entered into by the respondents suggests that the only way Muslim students studying in public schools in Marsabit County can wear the hijab is courtesy of the MOU and not by dint of the Constitution, argued Goyo's lawyer. Meaning, you are influencing my religious garb institutionally instead of constitutionally, and that is risky, and we want to remove that. Okay, it is not the first time that the battle over hijab is before the corridors of justice. Let's look at these other cases. This is the one I was like, a separate war between the Methodist Church and the Attorney General escalated all the way to the Supreme Court, but was not conclusively resolved following the entry of a parent in the case midstream. The church had sued the education ministry and the attorney general after the girls in its school caused havoc after they were denied permission to wear hijabs. So this is a school run by a church. We already have an idea of it's a Christian space, right? And not a lot of denominations veil. I veil as part of my personal practice. It's actually not a core trait of any of the denominations that raised me and still influence me today, right? So this Christian school, it sounds like, said no to hijabs. And the reaction came up, right? And it got escalated all the way up to the Supreme Court. Controversy over the issue of school uniform arose on June 22nd, 2014, when the Isiolo Deputy Governor Mohammed Gulaid asked St. Paul Kiwajani Day Mixed Secondary School Administration, sponsored by the Methodist Church, to allow girls to wear the veils and trousers on top of their uniforms. So the deputy governor was saying, hey, Christian schools, could you please allow our Muslims to like wear their veils and just wear trousers, just layering, you know? A week after the request, girls who reported with the extra attire were asked to revert to the prescribed uniform. They went on a rampage. Honestly, I feel like if you don't have nuance, you're going to have a lot of conflicts in your life. Because I'm used to seeing, I've been to British schools, mixed British and Kenyan system schools. I've been to American schools. I've been to these kind of like subgenre schools that are very student based, right? And like I'm used to seeing it's like part of the landscape because they are still wearing the uniform. They just have kind of like accommodations. Like the white pants still pick up on the white of their blouse. It still looks great. And they're even paying mind to the color of their veils to keep the trend of their uniform. It's one thing if the colors don't match. Okay, uniformity. But here, I honestly don't agree with this because I'm like, that is their uniform. And they were being so rigid. And I would argue a little, maybe, very simple understanding of what a Christian could look like, that this just blew up, right? The push and pull over the same led to the county education director ordering the transfer of the school principal and directing that the girls be allowed to wear hijabs. So it was admin that was very strict on, no, this is my aesthetic, is what it sounds like to me. Instead of being like, it ain't about you, it's about who you're serving. And as an administrator, you're serving the school community. It's not just about you. So if this is our school uniform and people have accommodation needs, what can we do to blend into the aesthetics of our school while not denying your individuality? Because you will bring in things like little pen, your little perfume, your little the way you wear the thing, because your body has its own coat rack style. It's like, and you be happy. And then your school is uniform but pretty. In my, you pick your battles, right? And, hold on. Okay, so the church moved to the High Court and argued that allowing Muslim girls to wear hijabs amounted to special treatment against those who did not profess the faith. What does this sound like? Reverse discrimination. That is what their argument was, which is if we allow people to veil, isn't it unfair to like everybody else? I'm like, it ain't about them. It's not relevant to them. It's kind of that argument of like, if you focus on empowering the women, it's going to be so unfair for the men. And I'm like, it's not like we're like putting them in the corner and like ignoring them. No, we're saying that women have been ignored and we're consciously paying attention because historically, in this case, scenario, industry, whatever, they were overlooked subconsciously and now even consciously by some people. Now we're moving against that. Of course, call us out if you feel slighted, but you need to parse out injustice from your ego, right? So this is just a classic reverse discrimination statement here of if we let these people veil, it's going to be so unfair for everyone else. And I'll be like, what did everybody else say? Is it like relevant? Because if you create this blanket baseline of if you veil in your practice, respectfully, you may veil in your practice. Doesn't the story just end there? Or did I miss something? Right? Then look at here. Methodists submitted that each child and their parents sign a form agreeing to submit to the school rules, and thus religion could not be used as a way of escaping from authority. Basically, they're pulling rank here, saying you agree to follow whatever we say. There is no collaborative participation here. There is no community participation here, which again is a horrible way to run things, right? Ha ha! The court heard that those who were opposed to wearing the prescribed school uniform were free to transfer to other school where their dress code was allowed. I'm embarrassed as a Christian. Okay, I think it's obvious, right? Okay. According to the church, standardization of school uniforms was important, as children ought to grow up knowing that there should be no preferential treatment against one another. Do you know what I learned in the real world? There's always someone worse off than you. There's always someone better than you. There's something called bias and stereotype in the world and prejudice. Not everyone is treated the same. Now, it's the goal. It's a worthwhile goal and it's worth working for and moving towards together. No one's going to disagree with me on that. But to raise kids with this idea of one world, one heart, it's good goals and values, but we also need to be realistic and be like, there's things like competitions, grade rankings, people get prizes 1 to 3 and maybe a runner-up or two, and that's it, because they worked hard for it and they beat you. It doesn't mean your value is less than, it just means you did not beat them. And let this motivate you to learn from them and have healthy rivalry so you both happy ending. Okay, so I read this and I was like, why is it so complicated? Because we already have uniform, which by the way makes it so easy in the morning. I don't have to think about it, right? And it's cute and it's funny and it becomes part of your familiar landscape and even building your brand and pride and like school identity of like, yeah, we're the Dolphins or whatever, right? But to use that as an excuse for why we don't want tweaks in the uniform is lame and it's weak, in my opinion, because it just sounds like an excuse. It just sounds like an easy, perfect answer way to get away with doing things the way you want to do it. Because I'm looking at this and I'm like, we're not the same. There are people with physical disabilities or differences. Their uniform's gonna have to be tweaked so that it's comfortable to move around and safe. There are people with religious observances, so how are you going to accommodate them because they have the right to learning? And there are people in Christian denominations that veil, and I veil in my personal practice, so what are you going to do with my existence? So if you don't have a skeletal framework through which to make decisions, you're going to be so rigid and so hard to work with. You're gonna hurt people and turn people away from the faith as well. So, oh my gosh! Now, a parent named Muhammad, a parent named, where are we? A parent named Mohammed Fugija also joined the case after his three girls were locked out of the school for wearing hijabs. What love is this? Some people wait a lifetime for a moment like this. No, God forbid. He submitted that school excellence was not measured by what a student puts on. Justice Harun Makau agreed with the church and blocked the girls from wearing the hijab. I wonder if Harun Makau is Christian. I don't know. But if you're running on the basis of policy and the fact you signed that the school rules are the way you're going, you'd kind of look like a weak case that you're building. But if you push the fact that the school did not do community participation or engagement to phrase and execute this MOU in a way that was inclusive, flexible, understanding without disregarding the aesthetics of the school, I think that should have gone through, or at least it should have been one of the recommendations, even after the girls were recommended to transfer. Because, like, you're trying to avail quality education. And many religious groups back this. God bless you, you know? And if you're going to live in this reality that everyone looks like you, one, you're actually not helping people individually grow and safely explore reality. And then two, you're stifling the youth from exploring creatively, which is kind of half of what they do all the time, if not everything of their being. Bruh. Bruh. On appeal, however, the court held a contrary opinion that although the school rules are important, they should not be used to the disadvantage of others who do not subscribe to the same belief. Execution of the MOU. I agree. With their ruling, Justices Philip Waki, retired, Rosalind Nambuye, retired, and Patrick Kiage found that the rules should be tailored to take into account situations that can force exemption and diversity. Honestly, I feel like it feels like a no-brainer, but then also you're working with people who were at times trained to focus to work through with policy and protocols, and they just vary by the book, right? It's good to think though about application of the book because you're dealing with people who have feelings and are coming into being. It's kind of what humans do, we just keep coming into being. And if you don't remember that rules are made for man and not man for rules, and we exist in a perpetual state of like bending and being stiff and pulling and letting go and trying and withdrawing, like coming and going, you are going to become public enemy number one on some level, in some way, in some case. You're gonna hurt somebody. So I thought that was very interesting, and I really want food for thought. Like, what do you guys think? Because my stance for this is should create a policy where it's like, hey, we are allowing freedom of religious expression as long as it doesn't hurt you or your neighbor. This is specifically about hijab. My only recommendation is I'm going to be kind of strict with color and nothing too pizzazz, because it still should be part of the school uniform. And so y'all know our school uniform. So maybe because of the way you've colored your clothes, maybe the pants have to be black. Or it's white, black, gray, whatever. But you've created guidelines for aesthetics. Everyone gets that. And you've also allowed for this. And you're kind of creating a public stance of like, no, we support our students to choose their religious forms of expression, whether it's a church-backed school or a Muslim-backed school. And but On that note, there are certain spaces that, because of the values and worldview of the school, they're molding kids towards a specific direction. So there may be certain schools that say you have to veil because we're trying to instill certain aesthetics and values and experience moralities around things like beauty, modesty, humility, etc. If you don't have a framework for veiling, it may actually feel oppressive and like religious indoctrination on some level. On the flip side, Christians who feel like they need to restrict hijabs may feel like it's a point of religious marker of saying this is a Christian school, we're not a Muslim school. So I can understand those two perspectives. I think it just comes from a place of being like, you choose the schools you take your kids to. Let it align with your family values. And also, I'm really gonna pick you on the church side because we're so fluid that I'm mad. Because we have veiling Christians, we have veiling traditions. So on our side, it should actually be way more flexible, I would argue, than the Muslim side. Because I can understand Muslim practice of like, we expect our women to veil. It's inbuilt into a religious practice, I'm assuming. Again, I'm Christian, so sound off on the chat if I'm wrong, if it's not like one of those embedded things of like, no, yeah, women veil. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Because I also know it's been written, if I'm not mistaken, that you cannot veil in scenarios where it's risky or dangerous to you. So it's not the dependence of your morality, but it's an exhibition of virtue and faith and devotion. Does that make sense? So even if a Muslim is not veiling, she's still Muslim and she has not dishonored God. But if the sect you're from does tie it into virtue and morality, it would damage your reputation on some level, you know. So same thing with the church. There's some denominations where we expect you to veil because it's kind of like woven in, right? And culture and heritage and all that. But most, again, I'm still learning about denominations. Sound off in the chat, brothers and sisters of mine. I feel like more denominations than not are so freaking fluid regarding attire, so long as you are mindful about how clothes fit on your body and how it moves with your body as you move, because we are creatures of art. Pick your clothes wisely. That's all I'm saying. Not because it's a touchy topic, but because there's so much. There's so many different body types that like I cannot cover right now, and that's not the topic of this video. So yeah. Anyway, what do you guys think? What's your stance on this whole thing of like policy influencing religious attire? I feel like it's just good to go with the basics of like freedom of religious expression. Just don't hurt you, don't hurt your neighbor.